When Denzel Washington strolled past a small toy stand on a quiet city street, most people barely noticed. Just another man walking by. Just another face in the crowd. But when he paused, looked at the toys, and met the eyes of the girl behind the table, everything changed. Because this wasn't just any sidewalk sale. 9-year-old Lily Bennett wasn't playing shop. She was selling the last of her childhood to help her family survive. And what Denzel did next, it wasn't charity. It was something far deeper. Something that would change Lily's future forever. In a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of a fading neighborhood, Lily Bennett was learning things no child ever should. While other kids her age were worried about lost homework or scraped knees, Lily's world revolved around infusion schedules, medical charts, and the soft click of IV drips. She had cancer, the kind that didn't wait, didn't slow down, and didn't care how young you were. And while her body fought to stay upright, her parents were fighting a different battle, one with numbers, deadlines, and bills they couldn't outrun. Her mom, Claire, worked double shifts at a nursing home, barely sleeping between laundry cycles and late-night emergencies. Her dad, Marcus, picked up odd jobs wherever he could, fixing roofs, hauling junk, even washing windows downtown just to scrape together enough for Lily's treatment. But it was never enough. Each hospital visit added another 4-digit number to the growing mountain of debt. And the worst part? They never told Lily. They tried to protect her, wrapping each worry in soft smiles and hopeful words. But she knew. Of course she knew. She saw it in the silences at dinner, in the way her mom stared at expired coupons, in the quiet tears her dad wiped away when he thought she was asleep. And one night, while lying in bed, wrapped in her thinning blanket and surrounded by her old stuffed animals, Lily made a quiet, grown-up decision. If her body was too weak to fight the cancer alone, maybe her heart could fight something else. The money, the fear, the weight her parents carried every day. So she got up early the next morning. Her body ached, her legs wobbled, but she moved. One by one, she placed her favorite toys, her teddy bears, her plastic horses, the tiny race cars she used to race across the kitchen tiles into a small cardboard box. And then, with a handwritten sign that read, "Selling my toys to help pay for my cancer treatment," she walked with her dad's help to a quiet sidewalk downtown. She didn't ask for pity. She didn't cry. She just waited and hoped. The first hour passed slowly. Lily sat behind her little folding table, her knees tucked under a blanket, watching people walk by. Some glanced at her sign, then quickly looked away. Others offered a tight smile before moving on, the weight of their own lives too heavy to let in someone else's pain. A few parents with children walked past without stopping, tugging their kids away before they could ask too many questions. She managed to sell one small stuffed animal, a faded, one-eyed puppy named Max, to an older woman who pressed a crumpled $5 bill into Lily's hand and whispered, "Bless you, sweetheart." But then the woman was gone, and Lily was alone again. Hours stretched. Her body started to slump. The chemo had left her weaker than usual that day, and even holding her head up took effort. Her dad, sitting quietly a few steps away, kept checking in, offering water and encouragement. But Lily just smiled, her lips pale, refusing to show how tired she was. She didn't want him to feel worse. She didn't want him to take her home. She had expected people to stop, to care, to help, but they didn't. And with every passing minute, her hope thinned like the pages of an old storybook. A gust of wind knocked over 2 of her dolls, and when she reached to pick them up, her hand trembled. She was too tired, too drained. And that's when the first unkind moment hit. A businessman in a sharp suit walked by, glanced at her table, and muttered under his breath, "Exploiting sick kids now?" Lily looked up, confused, her lips parting to respond, but he was already gone. Her father stood, anger flashing in his eyes. But Lily just shook her head and whispered, "It's okay, Dad." But it wasn't okay. Not really. Because in that moment, something inside her flickered not just from exhaustion, but from the quiet sting of being seen and dismissed. By midday, the sun had shifted overhead, casting long shadows across the pavement. Lily's sign had started to curl at the edges. The marker ink had bled a little, making the words look softer, almost faded like her. People continued walking past, barely glancing. Some slowed down just enough to read the sign, but not enough to stop. Others whispered to one another, offering sympathy with their eyes, but not their actions. A group of teenagers came by, loud and laughing. One of them looked at Lily's table and said, not cruelly but carelessly, "It's probably fake. Just some scam to go viral." They didn't stay long enough to notice the hollowness of her cheeks, the foreport hidden beneath her sleeve, or the tiredness she fought with every breath. They didn't care that every toy on that table had been loved deeply and for years. They saw a scene, not a story, a setup, not a sacrifice. Lily said nothing, but her dad saw it all. He gripped the arms of his chair tighter. Every fiber in him wanted to defend her, to scream at the ignorance, the injustice. But he also knew this moment wasn't about him. It was about Lily, her strength, her decision. And so, he stayed silent, biting back every word. Then came the woman with the little boy. The boy, maybe 5, reached for a small action figure one Lily had gotten for her birthday 2 years ago. He looked up at his mom and said, "Can I have it?" The woman glanced at the sign, then at Lily, and replied with a shrug, "Not today," before pulling him away. The boy cried. Lily watched them go, holding back tears of her own. It was a quiet kind of pain. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. Relentless. 1,000 tiny rejections, each one carving a little more from her hope. And yet, she stayed. She didn't pack up. She didn't complain. She believed somehow that someone would care. By late afternoon, Lily's strength was slipping fast. The chill had crept back into the air, and her blanket wasn't enough anymore. Her lips had turned slightly blue, but she kept her hands tucked in her lap, gripping the edge of her chair like an anchor. Her father offered again to take her home, but she just shook her head, her voice barely more than a whisper. Not yet. She hadn't sold a toy in over 2 hours. The street grew quieter. The few people who still passed looked tired themselves, workers heading home, eyes on their phones or the pavement. One man dropped a quarter in a cup, thinking it was for spare change, and didn't even glance at the table. Lily gently set the coin beside her tiny stack of bills like it was treasure. Every cent counted. The last glimmers of sunlight were fading when a small gust of wind sent one of her dolls rolling off the edge of the table and into a puddle. Lily stood to get it too fast and stumbled. Her dad was there in a heartbeat, catching her before she hit the ground. She wanted to cry, but didn't. He helped her sit again, wiping the doll with a napkin. She just stared at it, quietly brushing the wet from its hair. That's when the journalist noticed her. She wasn't there to write a story. She'd just finished an assignment and was cutting through the side street to catch her train. But something made her stop. Maybe the sign. Maybe Lily's eyes. She approached gently, crouching down to Lily's level, and asked about the toys. Lily looked surprised. Someone had actually asked. So she told her. About the chemo. The toys. The hope. The woman didn't cry. She just listened. Then she pulled out her phone and asked, "Do you mind if I share your story?" Lily nodded. Her voice was too tired to say yes, but the look on her face said everything. The woman snapped a few quiet photos, typed something fast, and posted it before disappearing down the street. Lily didn't expect anything to come from it, but it did. It started small, just a vibration in the journalist's pocket as she stepped onto the train. Then another, and another. Her post, just a few sentences and 3 quiet photos, had struck something deeper than she expected. By the time she reached her stop, it had been shared over 1,000 times. People were commenting, asking where Lily's stand was, offering to help, to donate, to share her story further. Something was happening. Back on the sidewalk, Lily sat quietly, unaware. The street was nearly empty now. Her dad was already packing up some of the unsold toys, urging her to call it a day. Lily hesitated, then nodded, too tired to argue. She stood slowly, swaying slightly from exhaustion. That's when a woman jogged toward them, from the far end of the block. "I saw the post," she said, a little out of breath. Is this Lily?" Her dad looked confused. Lily looked stunned. Within 10 minutes, 2 more people arrived. Then 4. Then a couple with a little girl who carefully picked out a doll and placed a $20 bill on the table without saying a word. More footsteps, more eyes. People who hadn't walked past earlier, they were arriving because of Lily, not in spite of her. Some bought toys, some left money. One man handed Lily a handwritten note with a simple message: "You matter more than you know." Lily's eyes lit up for the first time in hours. Her face, pale and tired, managed a real smile. Not because the pain was gone, not because the problem was fixed, but because for the first time that day, she didn't feel invisible. And just as it seemed the evening had given her everything she could possibly expect, a quiet figure stepped forward from the small growing crowd, calm, present, intentional. Denzel Washington. At first, Lily didn't recognize him. To her, he was just another kind face in the growing crowd. He wore a dark cap, pulled low over his brow, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being unseen when he chose to be. But something about him made people around him pause. A subtle hush rolled through the sidewalk like a breeze. Denzel didn't say much at first. He stood still, eyes scanning the table of toys, really seeing them. Each worn figure, each stuffed animal lined up with love and purpose. Then his eyes met Lily's. He didn't look away. He didn't offer the usual, "I'm sorry," or "stay strong." He just looked calm, steady, warm, like he understood something deeper than words could reach. He knelt slowly beside her table. His voice, low and gentle, asked her about the toys. Not the illness, not the tragedy, the toys. Which one was her favorite? Which had the best story? Lily lit up. She told him about Mr. Waffles, the bear who used to guard her from bad dreams. She held up a tiny plastic pony and said, "This one always helped me believe I'd get to run again someday." He listened, fully. No distractions, no rush. Then, after a moment of quiet, he looked at her father and asked, "Would it be all right if I bought something?" Her father nodded, still stunned. Denzel stood, reached into his coat, and pulled out a checkbook. He didn't ask how much. He didn't make a speech. He simply wrote deliberate, bold strokes and gently placed the check on the table in front of Lily. Wu, Shi, Ling. No cameras. No press release. No entourage. Just one man, honoring one girl's courage. Lily's breath caught. Her father stood frozen. Someone in the crowd gasped softly, but no one moved. And then Denzel smiled, tipped his cap, and quietly walked away. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt sacred. Lily stared at the check on the table like it wasn't real, like it might vanish if she blinked. Her father, hands shaking, finally picked it up and read it again, just to be sure. He looked at Lily, then at the direction Denzel had walked, then back at Lily, eyes filled with something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time, relief. And then, quietly, Lily began to cry. Not because of the money, not because her burden was gone, but because for the first time in what felt like forever, someone had seen her not as a victim, or a patient, or a helpless child, but as a person, a fighter, a storyteller, a kid with dreams and dignity. The crowd slowly started to move again, but something had shifted. People weren't just buying toys anymore, they were listening to her. They were asking about her story. Strangers hugged her father. Some knelt to talk to Lily, asking if they could take a picture with Mr. Waffles. Others simply placed donations in a small box that had been sitting untouched for most of the day. And as the story spread faster now, phones lit up. Screens glowed. The journalist's post, now reposted by celebrities, news outlets, and thousands of everyday people, had become something larger than any one moment. But for Lily, the real shift was quieter. That night, back at home, she sat on her bed surrounded by empty spaces where her toys used to be. Spaces she had feared would make her feel even more alone, but she didn't feel empty. She felt light. Because in giving everything she had left, she hadn't lost anything. She'd found something. Connection. Courage. The proof that what she did, what she chose, mattered. The next morning, Lily's story wasn't just local, it was national. News anchors spoke her name. Talk shows debated the power of compassion. Hashtags with her photo trended in more than a dozen countries. But somewhere, tucked between all the headlines and reposts, was a message that no one expected. It came directly from Denzel Washington's team, a quiet, verified note on social media that read, "No interviews, no press. This wasn't a gesture, it was a moment. She gave more than I ever could." But that wasn't the twist. What came next was, overnight, a campaign started. Not by a corporation, not by a PR firm, but by parents of other children with cancer who had seen the story and recognized a part of their own lives in Lily's quiet stand. They didn't want sympathy. They didn't want attention. They wanted to honor what Lily had done and what Denzel had made possible. So, they created the Lily Fund, a grassroots fundraiser to help other children in similar situations. In 48 hours, it raised over 250. By the end of the week, it passed 1 million. Donations poured in from actors, teachers, students, nurses, Uber drivers, retirees, soldiers overseas. But the largest donation came from someone no one expected, a single mother from Ohio who sent in 17 her last until payday, with a note that simply read, "She reminded me that hope isn't naive. It's brave." And still, Lily didn't ask for the spotlight. She just watched from her hospital bed, eyes wide, IV in her arm, her father reading updates aloud as if narrating a miracle in real time. It wasn't just her treatment that was getting funded now, it was others. Children she'd never met, families she'd never know. Because one act of quiet courage, one table of secondhand toys had become something far more powerful than she could have ever imagined. The world didn't just see Lily, it responded. Letters flooded in from every corner of the country. Handwritten cards from kindergarten classes, drawings of toy stands from kids who had never met her, and heartfelt messages from cancer survivors who called her braver than we ever were. A police department in Texas sent a badge with her, name etched into the back. A nurse from Canada offered to fly in and volunteer her time. Even hospital administrators, who had once been silent about costs, stepped forward offering to waive future fees for treatment. And still, the most powerful reactions were the quietest. In one video that went viral, a young boy in remission set up his own toy stand next to a sign that read, "Inspired by Lily, helping the next kid." He sold everything, then donated every dollar. In another corner of the internet, a woman shared how she'd walked past Lily's stand that day but didn't stop too busy, too distracted. She wrote a post that read, "I saw her. I didn't help, but now I will. For the rest of my life, I will." Denzel never spoke about it again. He didn't have to. What he gave wasn't just money, it was legitimacy. He took a moment no one was willing to slow down for and made the world freeze. He didn't step in as a celebrity. He stepped in as a man who saw something too important to walk past. And Lily? She stayed humble through it all. When asked how it felt to have the world watching, she just smiled and said, "I'm just glad the toys found good homes." No spotlight, no speech, just grace. Lily's treatment continued, fully funded now not just by one man's generosity, but by a wave of collective belief. And each time she walked into that sterile hospital wing, she carried more than a chart and a diagnosis. She carried a story, one that had traveled far beyond her little corner of the world. One that reminded people what it meant to stand up, even when you're small, even when you're scared. The toy stand never came back, not because she gave up, but because she didn't need to anymore. Every last stuffed animal, every tiny trinket had been adopted. Some sat on the desks of CEOs. Others in the hands of children halfway across the globe. They weren't just toys anymore. They were symbols of sacrifice, of strength, of the quiet kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. And somewhere, in a small room lined with get-well cards and tiny plastic ponies sent from strangers, Lily sat by her window with the sun warming her face. Her hair was slowly growing back. Her smile, never quite gone, now came easier. She still had a long road ahead, but the weight had shifted. Because when the world walked past, she stayed. She hoped. She gave. And when one man finally stopped when he saw her, he didn't just write a check. He turned a moment into a movement. And somehow, without meaning to, a girl selling her toys to save her family ended up saving far more than she ever imagined.